Welcome back to UK Economic Report. What I'm about to reveal today will fundamentally change how you view Britain's economic future. While politicians smile for cameras and economists publish optimistic forecasts, a perfect storm is brewing beneath the surface, one that threatens to reshape the very fabric of British society. This is the crisis they don't want you to see. This is UK 2026 Exposed. We're living through one of the most deceptive economic periods in modern British history. On paper, the economy shows signs of recovery. Inflation is supposedly under control. The stock market ticks upward. But behind these carefully crafted statistics lies a darker reality, a tale of two crises converging with devastating consequences for ordinary British families. The property market and food affordability crisis aren't separate issues. They're interconnected symptoms of a broken economic system. And 2026 is the year where these fault lines become impossible to ignore. Let's start with property. The average UK house price has reached astronomical levels that would have seemed impossible just a decade ago. In London, the average property now costs over 15 times the median annual salary. Let that sink in. 15 years of your entire income before tax, just to afford an average home. But here's what the headlines aren't telling you. This is not a simple supply and demand story. Yes, Britain builds too few homes. Yes, planning regulations strangle development. But the real crisis runs deeper. Interest rates, after years of historic lows, have created a generation of homeowners sitting on properties they technically can't afford at normal rates. When the Bank of England was forced to raise rates to combat inflation, thousands of families suddenly found their mortgage payments doubling, even tripling overnight. The remortgaging crisis of 2024 and 2025 was just the beginning. In 2026, we're seeing the second wave. Those who locked in fixed rates during the pandemic are now coming off those deals and facing economic reality. The result? A frozen market where sellers can't sell without massive losses and buyers can't buy without crippling debt. For those locked out of ownership, the rental market offers no refuge. Average rents in major cities have surged by over 40% since 2020. In London, Birmingham, and Manchester, it's not uncommon for families to spend 60 to 70% of their income just on rent. Landlords, squeezed by higher mortgage costs, increased taxes, and new regulations, are either passing costs to tenants or exiting the market entirely. This exodus of small landlords has reduced rental supply precisely when demand is soaring, creating a perfect storm of unaffordability. The human cost is staggering. Families are moving further from jobs, squeezing into inadequate spaces, or facing the very real prospect of homelessness. Council waiting lists have ballooned to record levels. Emergency accommodation costs local authorities billions, money that could have prevented this crisis if invested wisely years ago. Now, let's talk about what's happening in Britain's supermarkets and dinner tables. The cost of living crisis hasn't ended. It's evolved into something more insidious and permanent. Food inflation may have cooled from its 2022 to 2023 peaks, but prices haven't fallen. They've plateaued at these elevated levels. The average British family now spends approximately $200 more per month on groceries than they did 3 years ago. For millions living paycheck to paycheck, this isn't a statistic. It's a daily emergency. Food bank usage has reached levels that would have been unthinkable in a G7 economy. Over 3 million people, including hundreds of thousands of children, now rely on food charity to survive. Working families, people with full-time jobs, queue alongside the unemployed because wages simply haven't kept pace with the cost of essentials. This brings us to London, where the crisis reaches its zenith. The mayor of London faces an impossible situation. The capital, once a beacon of opportunity and prosperity, is rapidly becoming unlivable for anyone outside the top income brackets. Recent surveys reveal shocking truths. Nearly 40% of Londoners skip meals regularly to afford other necessities. Middle-class professionals, teachers, nurses, police officers, are leaving the capital because they simply cannot afford to live there, even on decent salaries. The political implications are explosive. How can London function as a global financial hub when its essential workers can't afford to live within commuting distance? How sustainable is an economy where the people who keep the city running, cleaners, hospitality staff, transport workers, are being systematically priced out? The mayor's response has been inadequate, not necessarily through lack of effort, but because the levers of power required to fix this crisis lie beyond municipal control. National economic policy, Bank of England decisions, and global market forces have created a situation that no single mayor can resolve. Here's where property and food crises intersect catastrophically. When housing costs consume 60 to 70% of income, and food takes another 20 to 30%. British families are left with almost nothing for savings, healthcare, education, or unexpected expenses. This isn't just individual hardship, it's economic destruction on a systemic level. Consumer spending, which drives 70% of the British economy, is collapsing among vast swaths of the population. Small businesses are failing. High streets are dying. The economic multiplier effect of this crisis will ripple through every sector. We're witnessing the emergence of a new British underclass, not the unemployed or destitute, but working families trapped in permanent financial precarity despite doing everything society told them to do. Get educated, work hard, play by the rules. Government statistics mask the severity through creative accounting. Official inflation figures don't reflect real-world costs for ordinary families. Housing unaffordability indices use outdated metrics. Food insecurity data relies on voluntary reporting that captures only a fraction of the crisis. Financial institutions and property developers have vested interests in maintaining the narrative that this is temporary, that markets will stabilize, that normal service will resume. But the structural problems, underinvestment in housing, wage stagnation, regional inequality, Brexit trade complications, and post-pandemic economic distortions, aren't resolving themselves. So where does this leave us? 2026 is the year when denial becomes impossible. The property and food crisis isn't coming, it's here. The question isn't whether Britain will change, but how dramatically, and who will bear the cost of that change. For everyday Britons, the path forward requires awareness, adaptation, and advocacy. Understand the true scale of what's happening, make informed financial decisions, demand accountability from politicians who've allowed this crisis to develop. This is UK 2026 Exposed, the reality behind the reassuring headlines, the crisis they hoped you wouldn't notice until it was too late. If this video opened your eyes to what's really happening, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to know the truth. The more people understand what's coming, the better chance we have of demanding the changes Britain desperately needs. This is UK Economic Report, and we'll keep exposing the truth they don't want you to see.